Welcome to this edition of The Fix, where every Sunday we hold those in power to account. We tell you what matters, how it affects you, and why you should care. Now, before starting with regular programming, I have to address the issue of fake news and disinformation. Now, spreading half-truths, lies, and manipulating the way in which people process information is not a new practice. To illustrate this, let's look at the book Facing History and what was written about leaders such as Hitler and the Nazi machinery and how they used fake news and propaganda. Through their ministry, Hitler's information Minister Goebbels was able to penetrate virtually every form of German media, from newspapers, film, radio, to museums and school textbooks with, of course, their own propaganda. Whether or not the propaganda was truthful or tasteful was irrelevant to the Nazis. Goebbels wrote in his diary, "No one can say that your propaganda is too rough, too mean. These are not criteria by which it may be characterized. It ought not to be decent, nor ought it to be gentle or soft or humble. It ought to lead to success." Now, in South Africa, we see a similar narrative playing itself out here. For years, we've been fed misinformation, which has been geared to undermine institutions that are critical to building a society built on truth, justice, and openness. We have seen media articles proven to be fake that sought to undermine institutions such as the South African Revenue Services and the judiciary, among others. None of this, of course, mattered, as the purveyors of fake narratives would plug on, using any opportunity to portray themselves either as victims of the establishment media or as the way of conspiracies as a means of explaining away their duplicity. At the same time, the attacks on the media gained new opportunities for people who drove this fake and dangerous narrative when groups of journalists, of course, had been looking at the way in which people have been reporting on these matters. And of course, this is an issue that is constantly in the media. Now, there is a story doing the rounds at the moment which purports to involve factional elements in the African National Congress, together with journalists, business people, and of course foreign intelligence agencies trying to meddle in the affairs of the African National Congress. My name has been mentioned in these stories, and I want to use this opportunity on the platform The Fix to say categorically that that information is false. It is without any basis in truth, and of course we need to look at why this information is gaining ground in the country. We have established the telephone number from which this information has been doing the rounds, and it's been sent to leaders of political parties and journalists and opinion makers. And I have indicated to the person that I am going to be taking the matter to the police. And of course, we need to remind South Africans of the era of Bell Pottinger during the state capture years, which actively sought to manufacture a narrative around what was going on. And of course, the idea was to prevent us as South Africans from telling the difference between a truth and a lie. And here on The Fix, it is important for us to stick with the facts and to stick with the truth. And I wanted to take this opportunity to categorically deny my involvement in any of what is being stated in this dubious message. And I urge anyone who is in fact sent this message to report the matter to the police, as I am going to be doing. In a moment, we will be discussing the question of who is responsible for the death of Charl Kinnear and why the South African police management did very little to look after his safety, despite him complaining about being intimidated. Don't go anywhere. Now, after top anti-gang unit officer Charl Kinnear was assassinated in front of his family home in Bishop Lavis, many critical questions remain unanswered. Key among them is why his protection was never taken seriously by police management, despite him informing them, and of course despite the police watchdog IPID investigating the matter. This is of course a violation of police policy. Now, to get clarity, I am joined today by his widow, Nicolette Kinnear. Also joining me is Parliament's Police Portfolio Committee Chairperson, Tina Jumat-Peterson. Ladies, thank you so very much for taking the time to join me. Nicolette, let me start with you. You were meant to make a presentation to the Oversight Committee last Tuesday, and this is of course something that you sought because you wanted some critical answers from the Oversight Committee to hold people accountable. Just take our listeners and our viewers through why it was so important for you to address the committee and, you know, whether that meeting actually happened or not.
Hi there, good afternoon, viewers and Karima. Yes, it was important for me. I think when you heard the Minister on your show previously, you touched on the document that my late husband had submitted in late 2018, early 2019, the 59-page document where he actually mentioned or highlighted 6 members' names. And then that document, it sort of just went quiet. And then in July 2019, it was referred to the NPA with recommendations in terms of what needed to be done. And while then, I think shortly after my husband's assassination, it surfaced that the NPA had actually decided not to prosecute. So I had a lot of questions around that. As to why, firstly, the things that my husband addressed in the document was not taken seriously. It is concerning for me that on the one hand, I have, and I want for the purpose, referred to him as not my husband, but Lieutenant Colonel Kinnear, being referred to as a decorated officer, being referred to as being the best of the best, being highlighted by the kind of dockets that he was investigating, the seriousness of that. And then on the other hand, I have the NPA who says that this same decorated officer submitted a document to them that according to them does not have a foot to stand on in court. So that I couldn't understand, because on the one hand I have Lieutenant Colonel being decorated as this top cop, and on the other hand, I have the same person with 30 years experience being said that the document that he submitted does not have a foot to stand on. Okay, so that was one of the reasons.
Yeah, Nicolette, let's just pause here and bring in the Chair of Parliament's Portfolio Committee. Tina, thank you so much for taking the time out. You are, of course, Parliament's Oversight Committee. You hold the executive to account, as well as the Police Commissioner and the watchdog IPID. Now, for our viewers who are not able, to put all of the things together, this 59-page affidavit that Charl Kinnear had given to police management is, of course, an affidavit in which he complains that he is being targeted by members of what is referred to in various police correspondence as a rogue intelligence unit in the Western Cape. And this unit essentially prevents him from doing his work, tries and fabricates information, and implicates or pressures people to commit perjury, to implicate Charl in wrongdoing as he's investigating the question of, gun running and connections, to the underworld and corrupt police officers. And the key issue here is that this report wasn't just looked at by IPID. They actually investigated Charl Kinnear's claims. They recommended that the members of the so-called rogue unit be charged and that unit be shut down. In fact, I'm in possession of a copy of the report of the head of intelligence, General Peter Jacobs, who has apparently been suspended over the last few days by the National Commissioner. He recommended that that unit be shut down. And of course, it hasn't been shut down. And what is even worse is that members of that unit have now been given police protection. This is despite the fact that Charl Kinnear had his protection withdrawn. And of course, the case against these 6 have been dropped without any explanation. What is Parliament going to do about this? Are you planning to summon the police commissioner, the head of crime intelligence, and the minister to your committee to answer to why they ignored the recommendations of IPID?
Good afternoon, Karima. Good afternoon, Mrs. Kinnear. And once again, our condolences to you and your family, Mrs. Kinnear. The Portfolio Committee on Police received the petition from Mrs. Kinnear. We firstly would like to say that all political parties were united in saying that this matter must be investigated. Unfortunately, last week, we were doing the Budget Review Committee's reports, and that meant that we were in the National Assembly for the entire week, and committees were not sitting. However, we are committed to have the petition heard during our first session as a committee in the new year. Mrs. Kinnear will be called to present her side of the story. The National Commissioner, IPID, the Minister will be called. The heinous killing of Colonel Kinnear marks a turning point in our fight against crime and corruption. We will leave no stone unturned until we get to the bottom of this senseless killing. Now, we as a portfolio committee, we are accountable to the public. We are accountable to doing our oversight work with diligence, and we'll certainly be getting to the bottom of the story. We do not want to compromise the investigation, but as you said, there were certain weaknesses in what has transpired. There are 3 areas we have tasked ourselves as a committee to investigate immediately. The one is why Lieutenant Colonel Kinnear's security team were removed. The second matter would be that we're asking questions about is why the reports which we have are not being discussed properly and attended to properly. The third area of interest and of course concern for the committee is this existence of the road unit, why they continue to exist, and what particularly their role is and what will happen to them. We need accountability. The public at large needs answers, and Mrs. Kinnear and her family in particular need to get to the bottom of this. Absolutely.
Now, Nicolette, let me bring you in here. The question of security around Charl. We know that the anti-gang unit, its head, Andre Lincoln, had placed a Casper outside your house. But of course, this was the assassination wasn't the first attempt on Charl Kinnear's life. Just tell the public how many attempts there was on Charl's life, and as a consequence, your life, because I do understand that a hand grenade was also lobbed over the wall of your residence in Bishop Lavis.
Yes, Karima. Look, I think it's probably about 7 or 10 years, could be possibly longer, that from time to time it would surface, intel would come through that Charl and other senior officers were on hit lists. But the first attempt was done, or physical attempt on our property was on the 23rd of November last year. Now, on the 13th of November, he and General Lincoln were up attending meetings in head office. And on that day, intel came through that there was again a hit out on General Lincoln and my husband. And then immediately on that day, General Lincoln had us put under 24-hour guarding. And that was then the 13th, the 14th of November. Whilst being under guarding, on the 23rd, the hand grenade attempt was done. So our property was attacked while being guarded. And we had the guards with us up until about the 19th of December. and then the day shift still escorted and accompanied Charl to work as per normal, and the evening shift just never pitched. And that was when we started raising the questions as to why and what happened. I also, in early January, I raised the issue with media because I was concerned because my husband was not attacked on the road, my family was attacked while we were sleeping, and hence why I thought it fit to speak out for myself as a family. I also know that in communique it has come out that it was then suggested that Charl be moved back to Sea Point, where he was stationed before joining the AGU. And he refused to, and I understand why he did, because what he had uncovered in his investigations, he knew. Yeah. There wasn't this brainwash process that was going to happen between his old unit and being transferred somewhere else.
Okay, Nicolette, I just want to come back to, when Charl was assassinated, Minister Cele visited your house, and the question of who removed the security from the house was, of course, something that the minister had promised you on television, that he will come back to you. Can you tell our viewers whether Minister Cele had come back to you? Has he been in communication? Has he updated you on who gave the order for the protection to be removed?
Karima, to date, I have spoken to the minister. I haven't received any official report as to who gave the instruction. What had come out since the 18th was, and I think that was the other issue that I addressed in the petition, was that it became known on the 6th, between the 5th and the 6th, reports were handed both to the Hawks and to crime intelligence to state that, listen, here's trouble. Lieutenant Kinnear's phone is being pinged. And because technically, and I think a lot of the reports said top brass knew about Lieutenant Colonel's phone being pinged, and the initial investigation into why the guarding was removed was sanctioned by National Commissioner Sithole. It would then mean that technically, if top brass knew, that indirectly National Commissioner Sithole would also be implicated as being known, which would mean that we would need to get an independent organization to actually do the investigation. So whether that is the reason why I haven't received my answers, I'm not too sure, but that is where we are at the moment.
All right, let's hold that thought. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to look at the fact that in terms of police policy, they were obligated to protect Charl Kinnear because the police policy is very clear on this matter. And I had invited General Cele to come onto the program, Minister Cele rather. He initially agreed to come on but pulled out because he attended a funeral. And of course the National Commissioner refused to come onto the show, saying that the matter is under investigation, despite the fact that he had been on the fix previously and reported back on existing investigation. So, of course, a lot of questions that Nicolette and South Africa want to know about who took that decision to remove the protection from Charl Kinnear and why those mentioned in the report that he had logged are now, in fact, receiving protection. And, of course, today, Charl Kinnear is no more. Stay with us.